And that is the fundamental disconnect we're living through, isn't it? We bought into the gospel of technological connection.
Completely.
We're promised that tools like dating apps, with their massive user bases and their predictive algorithms, would solve loneliness forever. They were supposed to be the great eliminators of friction in the search for love.
It's the ultimate contradiction of the modern age. I mean, we have been granted this unlimited choice, the ability to connect with theoretically any compatible person on Earth.
The entire menu.
The entire menu. Yet the overwhelming psychological data, it just shows people are reporting emotional exhaustion, a crushing sense of loneliness, and this feeling that they are utterly disposable.
Like they're just one more face in an infinite scroll.
Exactly. The abundance of choice seems to have led directly to an atrophy of meaningful connection. It's a paradox.
And the official narrative, the one that's marketed to us relentlessly, is that this technology is just a benign facilitator of intimacy.
Oh, just a helpful tool.
Just a tool. We're told to use dating platforms, Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, to find the one. Then, okay, once we achieve a relationship, now we have relationship management apps like Coupla to coordinate our lives and make sure we carve out quality time.
And don't forget the wellness trackers.
Right. We even have femtech wellness trackers designed to enhance self-knowledge and thus, ideally, our intimate lives. The whole life cycle is managed.
And this narrative is powerful enough that it still dictates expectations, especially for the generation that grew up with these things. I mean, you look at Gen Z navigating this economic chaos and digital noise and their stated desires. They remain stubbornly traditional.
They do.
Almost 3/4 of them want the whole milestone sequence. They want to date, get engaged, get married.
They're seeking that traditional stability of partnership, but I think the underlying motivation is less about pure romance and it's more about survival.
I think you're right.
And that's the crucial twist, isn't it? Almost half of single Gen Z adults believe that having a partner would make them more financially secure. Love is no longer a luxury. It's an economic necessity.
Which brings us to the unseen narrative. The whole reason we're doing this deep dive.
Exactly.
We are dealing with a vital social institution. I mean, the way humans pair up and form basic social units that is now almost entirely controlled by massive corporate power. It is an architecture designed for profit.
Right.
Not for love.
As the architect of this system, I have to ask, when one or two corporations control the entire mechanism of social reproduction, are they acting in a way that respects the user's basic human interests?
And we're not talking about trivial preferences here.
No. We are talking about fundamental claims to non-interference in the choice of a partner, equal standing in the market of attraction, and genuine choice improvement.
Not just choice volume.
Not just choice volume. And if the design of the platform fundamentally undermines those human interests, then the system is broken regardless of how many marriages it facilitates.
So we have to view these platforms not just as tools, but as immense power structures that actually shape human desire itself.
That's the central tension. It's right there. Are these systems accelerating connection, or are they actively commodifying and controlling the rules of attraction for profit?
Let's start with the machine itself.
We have to begin with the mechanics of the machine, and specifically the numbers that quantify this structural failure. When we look at the digital dating world, we are looking at an environment that is profoundly unequal.
And we have the stats to prove it.
We do.
The attention economy on platforms like Tinder, it's quantifiable. And the numbers reveal a brutal, highly stratified economic environment that's applied directly to attraction.
So let's focus on the Gini coefficient. This is the standard measure economists use to quantify income inequality in nations. A score of 0 means everyone has equal wealth. A score of 1 means one person has all the wealth. Pretty straightforward.
Right, you hear it talked about with countries, with national economies.
Exactly, but when researchers measured the distribution of attention on Tinder, meaning who gets swiped right on and who gets matches, they arrived at a Gini coefficient of 0.58.
That's just a shocking number.
Think about what that means. An economy is considered highly unequal, often dangerously unstable, if its Gini coefficient crosses 0.50.
So at 0.58, Tinder's economy of attraction is more unequal than 95% of the world's national economies.
It's not a slight bias. This is a structural engine of extreme attraction inequality. It's built into the very code.
And this is where that quantifiable fact, that number, translates into a collective psychological reality for the user base. That 0.58 doesn't just represent high inequality, It represents a system where a tiny fraction of profiles, the top few percent, captures nearly all the available attention,
Right.
leaving the vast majority of users just scrambling for scraps.
And the data reveals precisely who is being left out in the cold. We can look at the metrics gathered by Occupy over time, which formalize this inequality based on gender experience.
The numbers are so stark. They illustrate the gender asymmetry of this whole emotional economy. Women rate a staggering 80% of men as worse looking than medium.
80%.
The overwhelming majority of men are deemed below average right out of the digital gate.
And what are the consequences of being placed in that 80% group by the algorithm?
Wow.
That below average block of profiles receives message replies only about 30% of the time, or even less. They're essentially rendered invisible, filtered out almost entirely.
Now, contrast that with men's collective standards for women. Men rate only about 50% of women as worse looking than medium.
A much lower bar.
Much lower. And crucially, that below average, half of women still receives message replies closer to 40% of the time or higher. The experience of digital rejection and invisibility is dramatically different depending on which gender you are.
This isn't just about statistics, though, is it? It's about the machine imposing a rigid hierarchy that dictates your self-worth. It removes the possibility of the slow, messy human process of reevaluation.
Exactly. When I look at those numbers, I think of the old cultural narratives we created precisely to cope with this attraction gap. Stories like The Frog Prince or Beauty and the Beast. They exist to bridge this enormous attractiveness disparity.
The fairy tale promises that sincere love and connection, given enough time, can transmute what is initially perceived as ugliness or deficiency into something beautiful.
Yeah, it suggests that a woman who initially regards a man as unattractive can eventually see his inner worth and bridge that massive aesthetic gap.
But the app architecture, which is driven by that Gini coefficient, it actively prevents this transmutation. The algorithm is designed for quick, visual, high-volume decisions.
It doesn't encourage time.
No.
It doesn't encourage sincere love or getting past that initial aesthetic judgment. It enforces the superficial gap, and crucially, it monetizes the anxiety created by that enforcement.
And this brings us right to the core mechanism of the architect of conspiracy, the monetization of insecurity. The system doesn't just reflect inequality, it sells the fix.
The clearest example of this pay-to-play power structure is Tinder Boost.
Right.
For a fee, the app will temporarily amplify your profile's visibility, putting it on top of other users' recommendation stacks for a half hour.
And here's the truly insidious part. The app does this without informing the other users that the profile they are seeing was placed there because the user paid money for a hidden advantage.
It's an artificially engineered moment of superiority.
And why do people buy it? As one user described, it's not just about getting more matches, it's about getting validation when you are feeling lonely.
Wow.
The corporate architecture is actively mining user vulnerability in the intimate sphere, offering temporary digital standing and self-worth paid for with cash.
So they engineer the feeling of being in that invisible 80%.
And then they sell you the temporary escape hatch.
That is bleak.
And this structural bias is replicated across the entire market because of the concentration of corporate power. We run this massive risk of what you could call algorithmic monoculture.
And that's because when you realize that the majority of the dating app, Market Tinder, Hinge, Occupy, Match.com, is controlled by a single entity, Match Group,
A whole game.
the implications become terrifying.
If a core bias is embedded into the algorithm, say a preference for certain racial groups, a certain height, or certain economic indicators, that bias is now replicated systemically across all major avenues for meeting people.
It leads to outcome homogenization.
Exactly. If you are facing negative outcomes on one Match Group app, switching to another is likely to expose you to the exact same biases because the underlying system and commercial logic are identical.
It fundamentally limits choice improvement. You think you're escaping the system, but the system is everywhere.
This is the definition of non-interference being undermined. The user is dependent on the arbitrary, proprietary, and high-stakes decisions made by a single corporate black box.
And this high cost of entry into the system acts as a second, just brutal filter, especially for the younger generation.
Yeah, we mentioned Gen Z's financial pressure earlier, and it cannot be overstated. They are forced into a financial bind.
1 in 5 single Gen Z adults sees singleness not as a lifestyle choice, but as a barrier to achieving essential financial goals.
A partner is viewed as a necessary asset for cost sharing and surviving the housing crisis.
But the pursuit of this asset is itself a massive financial burden.
A huge one. Gen Z singles spend, on average, over 111 pounds a month. That's over 1,300 pounds a year, just on dates and app subscriptions.
And over half of them feel this expense is actively preventing them from even going on dates.
It's the ultimate cruel paradox.
It is.
They need a partner for financial security, but the enormous cost of the dating process prevents them from even competing in the marketplace to find that secure partner.
And this is how financial security becomes the new attractiveness metric.
Hmm.
I see this shift in values so clearly. They are hyper-aware of economic fragility.
The numbers back that up. 78% of Gen Z singles believe financial compatibility is important. They cite a lack of savings or, reliance on the bank of mom and dad as major red flags.
And they hold these standards even while, 29% of them admit to having no savings themselves?
Exactly.
They are judging others by the very standards they struggle to meet because they grew up steeped in economic precarity. The transactional pressure is just overwhelming.
And this pressure is formalizing rapidly. We're seeing the emergence of dating apps that check potential partners' credit scores.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Dating has formally moved from a romantic quest to an economically calculated effort to secure a viable partnership. The economic architecture has completely overwhelmed the emotional one.
So when we look at the emotional environment created by this unequal economic architecture, the result is just pervasive digital fatigue. The qualitative findings, particularly among young women using apps in places like Copenhagen, they're consistently frustrating.
The platform promises access unlimited profiles, but the reality is a constant low-grade stress. It fosters superficiality, emotional fatigue, detachment, and most importantly, a profound ambivalence towards genuine commitment.
Users report 3 primary emotional challenges. First, the transition challenges. The chemistry they build online often evaporates instantly in real life.
The digital self and the real self don't match up.
Not at all. Second, commitment disparities. The apps facilitate constant interaction between people with vastly different intentions, leaving those seeking long-term connections frustrated by uncertainty.
And third, the emotional toll of ghosting and rejection, which triggers high anxiety and self-doubt. The system, designed for high-volume efficiency, seems specifically tailored to maximize emotional uncertainty and insecurity.
This is why we need to introduce the sociological framework. Modern dating is the purest expression of Zygmunt Bauman's concept of liquid love.
Can you unpack that a little?
Sure. Liquid love describes relationships that are treated like disposable commodities. In a modern economy based on constant flexibility, gig work, fluid commitments, freelance contracts, relationships follow that same logic.
They become another gig.
Exactly. They are constantly conditional, allowing people to reject, revise, and avoid deep entanglements easily. They are designed for a frictionless exit.
And that frictionless exit is underpinned by what Eva Ilaus calls scopic capitalism.
Scopic capitalism. That's where the value of bodies and sexualities is turned into tradable commodities via visual selection.
And the swipe is the mechanical, purest form of scopic capitalism. The dating app experience forces users to browse potential partners like they are browsing items on Amazon. The system inherently enhances the importance of physical attractiveness and encourages the user to keep their options perpetually open, always searching for the potentially more fulfilling next partner.
They are acting like ideal consumers in a dating marketplace. Why commit to the slightly scratched product when a potentially perfect, unblemished one is only 2 swipes away?
It prevents them from fully investing in the human being in front of them.
And when things inevitably fail or end without explanation, the modern trauma is the exit without voice. Ghosting is normalized as the default withdrawal mechanism.
It is not just rude, it's psychologically devastating because the silence forces the abandoned person to internalize the failure. They're left with no explanation, forcing them to question their own judgment, their worth, their perception of reality.
If the application is built for frictionless exit, it guarantees emotional friction for those left behind.
And the algorithm doesn't just monetize insecurity. It shapes users into highly judgmental creatures.
Yeah.
We've seen apps try to mediate the superficiality. Hinge, for instance, focuses on personalized prompts to encourage conversation.
Yeah, and users flock to Hinge because the prompts help subjectify the potential partner. You get a better initial impression of personality, making it easier to comment on shared values or interests rather than just appearance.
It's a technologically mediated attempt to escape the superficiality that its corporate sibling, Tinder, standardized.
But even trying to escape the machine with the machine introduces a new psychological trap.
Alienation. Users report feeling alienated on two levels.
Which are?
First, alienation from others. The people on the screen remain just that, pictures and prompts. It makes it easier to judge them harshly or devalue them as disposable objects.
I've heard this. One young woman noted that she became hyper-judgmental about strangers' choice of caps or workout photos, and then realized she was doing this purely because the context allowed her to objectify them instantly.
In a second level.
Alienation from their own actions. Users admit they don't like being so judgmental or self-critical, but the environment demands that highly selective, consumerist mindset. This creates what we call emotional objectification.
And that's the deep trap of modern digital dating, isn't it?
It really is, because the user has such limited real-life context. They build these elaborate, idealized expectations based on those perfect curated profiles. They project an entire future, a whole self-narrative, onto someone they've barely interacted with.
And when the real human being inevitably shows up, flawed, contradictory, human, they fail to meet the projected ideal.
Leading to profound disappointment. The potential partner is stripped of their actual identity and becomes a mere vehicle for the user's hopes, making the resulting relationship inherently fragile.
It was never about the person.
It was about the fantasy.
This exhausting high-anxiety cycle has sparked a predictable rebellion. People are trying to find an ethical exit from the scopic capitalism model through the rise of slow dating.
Yeah, slow dating is explicitly positioned as a resistance movement against the frantic transactional speed of digital culture. It's a yearning for intentionality, prioritizing thoughtful, mindful matching.
Reading the entire bio, caring about shared values, and insisting on longer, deeper conversations before meeting in person.
It's the quality over quantity ethos translated into romance. If fast dating is running a sprint in high heels, exciting but leading to frequent falls, slow dating is conceptualized as a scenic, sustainable marathon.
It's an aesthetic choice, too, reflecting movements like slow food or slow fashion, ethical, well-made, sustainable connection.
It's a conscious attempt to force non-interference back into the process. The core desire is for organic encounters outside the constraints of the corporate system.
But here is the paradox we keep coming back to. Users who yearn for slow dating still struggle to achieve it because the dating apps themselves remain the primary normalized venue for meeting people.
So the resistance happens inside the system.
Often facilitated by Match Group itself, which owns Hinge, the app most associated with this intentionality.
They're selling the cure to the disease they created.
The system is so pervasive that even the act of rebelling has been commodified and folded back into the digital architecture.
So we've established that the domestic economy of attraction, one operating in the US, Western Europe, and so on, is an unequal economic machine with a JD coefficient of 0.58.
Right.
When men feel completely locked out of this economy, feeling they cannot meet the required 6-foot, 6-figure or cultural standards, many are attempting an economic and emotional migration.
They are turning to what they call the passport bro phenomenon. Men leaving Western countries to find partners overseas, specifically in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Latin America.
And their stated motivations, which are often aggressively framed in their online communities, center on this frustration with Western dating culture.
A culture they characterize as having excessive feminism and impossible standards. They are seeking women who they perceive emphasize traditional gender roles, homemakers, mothers, valuing loyalty above career.
As the interpreter of secrets, I read this rhetoric as a deep crisis of masculinity, a feeling of inadequacy that's driven by the unequal digital market, but it's masked by a perceived desire for traditional roles.
They feel disempowered domestically.
And they seek environments where they can reclaim that power.
And as the architect, I have to look at the structural incentives. If the goal were merely to find a good traditional partner, why are they consistently choosing countries that have significantly lower educational opportunities, significantly lower living standards, and importantly, demonstrably lower levels of gender equality?
This is where the power dynamics shift from emotional preference to economic transaction.
It's a trade.
The marriage becomes an opportunity for both parties, but the opportunity is fundamentally imbalanced.
For the man, it's an opportunity to realize preferences that are heavily penalized in the domestic market, specifically marrying a much younger woman who adheres to traditional gender roles.
And for the woman, it is often an opportunity to realize migration preferences into a highly developed country, granting access to safety and financial stability they cannot achieve at home.
The data starkly reveals this transactional imbalance. When the development gap between the native man's country US, Sweden, Spain, and the foreign woman's country is substantial, the age difference between them is also dramatically greater.
So we see Swedish men marrying Thai women.
American men marrying Filipinas.
And we have to analyze the political dimensions of these choices. Men from countries like the US or Spain are statistically more likely to partner with women from nations ranked extremely low on global gender equality indices.
The power imbalance is baked right into the choice of destination.
It's an uncomfortable detail, but it speaks volumes about the motivation. These men, who complained about the weaponization of legal systems by Western women, often gravitate toward regions where the structural protections for women are significantly weaker.
We only have to look at the historical context of local laws. The Philippines, for example, where the age of consent was only raised from 12 to 16 in 2022.
Wow.
The destination choice often seems dictated by structural conditions that guarantee the man greater power and control.
This is a sophisticated economic exchange disguised as romance. The currency is relationship, power, and social capital, traded for financial security and migration status. It's systemic exploitation woven into the fabric of seeking intimacy.
And this systemic exertion of power over marginalized individuals seeking stability is mirrored in how technology and policy harm communities closer to home. We need to shift focus now to the devastating consequences of censorship on sex workers and the LGBTQ+ community.
Specifically, in the wake of the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, or FOSTA.
Exactly. While the stated goal of FOSTA addressing sex trafficking is unquestionably laudable, the reality of its implementation has been a catastrophe for those it was ostensibly designed to protect.
The law created a liability nightmare for platforms. Fearing massive lawsuits, online platforms engaged in this aggressive online censorship, shutting down any discussion that could possibly be construed as facilitating sex work.
Effectively closing vital online spaces overnight.
And the direct human consequences were immediate and severe. Of the sex workers surveyed post-FOSTA, 72% reported a substantial increase in economic instability.
And nearly 34% reported a spike in violence from clients. The safety net was pulled out from under them.
Why did violence increase?
Because platforms shut down essential peer-to-peer safety resources like Bad John's lists.
Which were lists compiled by sex workers to warn each other about clients who were violent, non-paying, or abusive.
Exactly. Conversations about health, safe practices, mutual support, especially vital for LGBTQ+ individuals and survivors, were just erased.
This forced sex workers, many of whom are already vulnerable, including survivors, transgender individuals, and marginalized groups, off the moderated, searchable online platforms and back into dangerous, unmoderated, in-person client-seeking scenarios.
Like cruising streets or seedy bars, screening potential clients became rushed, increasing vulnerability to violence and HIV transmission.
So the connection between the passport bro trend and FOSTA is clear. Both demonstrate how political, technological, and economic systems exert immense, disproportionate power over marginalized individuals seeking intimacy or financial security.
Whether it's economic desperation driving a woman into a transactional marriage abroad, or legal policy forcing a sex worker into a high-risk, unmediated physical environment.
The system dictates the terms of vulnerability.
The ability of a privileged individual, the passport bro, to buy power, and the ability of the government and corporate entities to impose policy like FOSTA, both result in the same outcome: stripping away the non-interference and agency of the marginalized.
So we move from the systemic inequality of the swipe to the global transaction of marriage. And now we turn inward to perhaps the most sensitive transaction of all: the surrender of our sensitive bodily data through femtech and period tracking applications.
These applications are profound non-human actors that generate immense commercial value. They are collecting incredibly intimate information, not just menstrual cycles and fertility windows, but often detailed logs of sexual activity, moods, cravings, anxieties.
Sometimes even fantasies.
This is where the famous privacy paradox becomes deeply disturbing. Users claim they value privacy highly. I mean, you wouldn't share this data with your colleagues or even many friends, yet they willingly divulge it to an opaque, profit-driven app for minimal personal benefit, usually just basic cycle insights or predictability.
The data shows a profound gap between stated values and actual behavior. Most users do not read the extensive, complicated privacy policies. Critically, most users do not proactively remove their consent for data sale to third parties.
There is an implicit trust in the non-human actor that is entirely misplaced.
The trust is misplaced because the data is a commodity. Companies do inform users that data is sold to third parties, the data brokers, but the language is purposefully obscure. The process to opt out is complicated.
And users rarely have any insight into who is ultimately purchasing and exploiting that data stream.
This is a critical failure of agency. Sensitive health data, even if it's initially scrubbed of direct identifiers, can frequently be re-identified through cross-referencing with other datasets.
We are creating an irreversible, massive pool of exploitable information about the reproductive health of half the global population.
This is how the uterus is transformed from a biological organ into a political and economic battlefield.
And as the architect of conspiracy, I look at the immediate implications of this data sharing 5 to 10 years down the line.
Think about the future. This data could be used by recruiters to assess the health risks of female candidates. A woman's cycle history indicating potential time off, for instance.
Insurance companies could use anonymized data to set rates based on ancestral health risks revealed by widespread data correlation. Governments could certainly use it.
This architecture requires us to think skeptically about the future. Let's consider the speculative warning contained in the prototype we analyzed. The conceptual documentary podcast, The Bloody Truth, set in the year 2123.
That narrative posits a chilling hypothesis that the voluntary logging of intimate period data became the starting point for total control over PLP people who menstruate.
The speculation details how this data, combined with a cultural acceptance of digital technology, similar to the microchipping we already see in places like contemporary Sweden, led to a society with mandatory microchips controlling health and reproduction.
The dystopian scenario is profound. We see a future where chipped data is used to enforce social economic hierarchies, excluding women with severe PMS from certain high-stress professional activities.
Or even, more chillingly, being used to identify women who have attempted or successfully had illegal abortions.
And the darkest corners of the speculation involve eugenics and racial purity drives, where government agencies utilize comprehensive access to reproductive health data to control population demographics.
The voluntary logging of a craving in 2024 becomes the involuntary mechanism of control in 2123.
Beyond the political and economic fears, there is a profound psychological toll related to algorithmic control today. Think about the internal conflict of logging complex emotions, sadness, anger, anxiety, into limited, predefined digital categories.
You're forcing complex, nuanced human internal states into a spreadsheet.
Yeah, and the user grapples with this. I have so many emotions in a day, and I wonder how they view that form of data consisting of 5 different feelings. What do they do with it? How do they interpret me?
We are effectively outsourcing the subjective experience of being human to a metric system designed for sale.
And that's the core danger. Technology risks eradicating human intelligence and self-reflection. When we are forced to accept the digital expertise of a non-human actor and trust them with the most private details of our physical and emotional lives,
An actor who is actively selling that information.
we lose the capacity to understand our own bodies and emotions organically. We become played by the metrics rather than simply recording them. We're allowing a critical, intimate human capacity to atrophy because it's easier to outsource the analysis of our own bodies than to sit with the ambiguity of self-knowledge.
We started this deep dive with the mathematical certainty of the Gini coefficient on Tinder, detailing how structural inequality is enforced and monetized in the quest for connection. We've ended contemplating a future where the data generated by our own biological processes could be used to create a digital caste system. The scope of corporate and systemic control over human intimacy is vastly more profound than we ever realized.
If we connect this entire arc, the economic stratification, the emotional alienation, the global transactional exploitation, and the datafication of the body, the central crisis is not about finding love. It's about agency.
These massive systems offer the illusion of freedom and expanded choice, but their opaque, profit-driven architecture actively shapes our desires, dictates our self-worth, and ultimately seeks to profit from the physical data of our most intimate selves.
The ultimate fight for non-interference in the 21st century is the fight for data sovereignty over the self. We are willingly providing the most sensitive information, our deepest emotional states, our reproductive health to non-human actors in exchange for mere convenience.
So we have to ask, if we are constantly outsourcing the complex work of self-knowledge, social connection, and emotional reflection to opaque algorithms, what essential, intimate human capacity are we allowing to atrophy forever? And what happens when the machines know us better than we know ourselves?
This episode is powered by Neon Core Media for stories they said were too real to tell.